today's episode, I wanted to do a little show and tell with something that I recently purchased. And it was this copy of Gabriel Knight, an original copy. But this is a very rare and a very old game, so I must handle it with gloves. And also because gloves are very good at making ASMR types of noises. Alright, now we can begin handling the game. This is a very, very rare game called Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. And this is one of my favorite games, and just recently on the eBay I saw a copy of it for sale, and I was like, you know what, I like these vintage video games and I like Gabriel Knight, so I think I will buy this copy. And it cost me a lot of money to get this copy of the game. But as you can see, it says cool stuff right here on the box about the game. It says the first time we have actually experienced fear from watching a computer game. Well, I actually think that's kind of silly, but you know, it's a pretty cool game. So we can see some cool concept arts on the back of this box. And you'll notice here is a picture of designer Jane Jensen. And it says that she has written horror and suspense stories for many years. And she was the co-author and co-director of the best-selling King's Quest VI Air Today, Gone Tomorrow game. This game is from 1993 from Sierra. So let's take this version. It says MS-DOS and Windows 3.5 HD, but I think it's only for MS-DOS. But I don't know. I know that this is the disc version of the game, not the CD-ROM version of the game. So let's take a look. So the person that sold this game to me, they wrapped it up in this bubble wrap to keep the discs safe, but I will never actually use these discs because I have the game digitally on GOG.com, and I actually also have a CD-ROM version of the game as well. As you can see, it actually takes a lot of discs. So it does say that they are MS-DOS and Windows 3.1 discs. So maybe there is a Windows version of the game, but the DOS version just ended up running better, and so that's why the typewriter to type the name of the game on the disc. It's not like special graphics for the disc. It is very, very primitive, and it's a very good game. And here's disc 3 and disc 4 and disc 5. It actually says the very date that these were made. November 20th, 1993 is when these discs were made. And disc 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this game is 11 discs big. And that is the disc version of the game. The CD-ROM version of the game actually features voice acting throughout the game, and that's actually the version of the game that I played originally, but I didn't play the game till I think 2001 or 2002. Alright, so let's have a look at the manuals included with the game. So it has very good artwork on this manual. It looks very, I don't know, horror-esque, evil even, one might say. I think this manual is the comic book. The game started with a comic book introduction. Yeah, it is. So the illustrations in this are by someone named Therese Nielsen, and it was written by Jane Jensen. Yeah, so this gives some backstory to Gabriel Knight. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'm going to show you the graphics and like how cool they look. So this is like ancient history. It's like the 1600s when what's called the Schattenjägers originally started, which Gabriel Knight becomes a Schattenjäger in Gabriel Knight 1. And not because he wants to. But this is actually a very good comic book. I mean, the art is very good. I don't remember the story that well, but I do enjoy this art. There's a very violent graphic here. I don't know what's going on, but it's very violent. I think this is where the comic book is getting into the modern day, where it gets into the main topic of this game, which is the voodoo murders. Alright, well that was very cool. The game also includes the technical manual in addition to the comic book. Like you had to click icons while playing the game to do things. Modern games are more context aware than the old adventure games were. But there's a lot of things. Oh, so some interesting things. In the CD-ROM version of the game, Gabriel Knight is played by Tim Curry, and he does a very good job doing this sort of cartoony New Orleans accent. But then Grace Nakamura is strangely played by Leah Remini. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But anyway, she was on the show King of Queens, and she had a very distinguished voice. And so it's interesting that she appears in this game as Grace Nakamura. And also, Mark Hamill of the Star Wars fame plays Detective Mosley in the game as well. So the game actually had a pretty interesting cast, considering, like, not a lot of people played computer games in the 90s, actually. You know, one thing about games today need to sell millions of copies to make back the money that it costs to make them. But back in the 90s, you usually only had to sell like 100,000 copies of a game to make back your money, because only a few people made the game. And we'll actually kind of see that in the credits of this game. So this is the entire credits of the game. You can't really see it because of the glare, but you'll notice, like, that's not a lot of people that made this game. You know, it really isn't. And, I mean, not everyone here was even working on the game full-time, probably. And some names appear multiple times. Like Jane Jensen lists herself as game designer and director. And I believe Robert Holmes appears multiple times as well. He did the music for the game, and if I do remember correctly, Robert Holmes and Jane Jensen are actually married, or at least they were at some point. But yeah, the stars of the game, there's some other stars as well, but Tim Curry as Gabriel Knight, Mark Hamill as Detective Mosley, then Michael Dorn plays Dr. John. Michael Dorn played Worf in Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And then, of course, Grace Nakamura is Leah Remini. But then none of these other names I don't recognize. I mean, if I looked them up, they might be from various things that you'd heard of. But yeah, I mean, here's the development team that made Gabriel Knight. See, it really is just a handful of people that made this game. And the game was very, very successful. Okay, so here on the last page there is a bibliography, as you can see. And I always thought that was funny about the Gabriel Knight games, is that Jane Jensen felt like her video game is as noteworthy as an academic paper when it comes to research. Which, I mean, I guess it is, but it's also kind of silly, I suppose, to have a bibliography in a video game. But it is cool. Oh, and here's some information about the cast. Like, it says some stuff about Tim Curry and whatnot. So that's the manual for the game. Then also, there is this advertisement for how to get hints for Sierra Games. And I don't know what would happen if you called that number today, but I would not call a 900 number, because I think you get charged for it. Okay, and so here is also, it says, "'Tis the season to be busy." I have no idea, but it's very holiday-esque. And then there is also this advertisement that says you can win a complete Sierra Dynamics game library for sending in the registration for this game. Which, I guess whoever owned this game sent in the registration, because you can see the perforation of them cutting it off. But I guess you could get Sierra's magazine from them for this. Okay, so that is Gabriel Knight 1. And I'm going to put these discs back inside of this backing, or this bubble wrap, to protect them, even though I'll never use these discs. I mean, there's a very good chance these discs are already just don't work. favorite Gabriel Knight game. It is Gabriel Knight 3. Blood of the Sacred. Blood of the Damned. A 3D mystery adventure. Now, I do not have a copy of Gabriel Knight 2 other than this archive collection version. And I have it on GOG.com as well. But Gabriel Knight 2 I never liked because it had the live action characters, and Gabriel Knight was just played by some guy named Dean Erickson. And it's like, who is this Dean Erickson guy, and why is he the guy that gets to play Gabriel Knight live action? I can understand why it's not Tim Curry playing Gabriel Knight, because he doesn't look like Gabriel Knight. But the live action Gabriel Knight was just some dork. He was very, very funny. But with Gabriel Knight 3, Tim Curry was back as the voice of Gabriel Knight, and they did 3D graphics, as you can see on the back of the box. So Gabriel Knight is fully 3D and fully animated. And actually, it also says that this Gabriel Knight Mysteries collection is also available, and that's actually how I had Gabriel Knight 2 originally, was through that collection. It actually included the Gabriel Knight book, Sins of the Fathers, which I think I'll just talk about since I have it here. But this is weird. Look at the front cover. That picture of Gabriel Knight is actually from Gabriel Knight 2. That is Dean Erickson, the guy that I just do not really like as Gabriel Knight. But this book, I read it, and it is verbatim the game. Like, it reads like a script for a video game. It's a very bad book. It's very, very badly written. Like, the only people that ever read this were fans of the video game. You know, no one would pick this game up and be like, oh man, this is the most interesting book I ever read in my life. I mean, obviously Jane Jensen wanted it to be a book. She wanted it to be like, people that don't know anything about video games are going to read this book, but it's a bad book. I mean, when I say bad book, I mean like technically bad. Like, it reads like a script. The things that it describes Gabriel Knight doing in this book, it's like no one would describe that. It literally says he got up, he woke up, because he wakes up in the game, and then it says like he walked around the French Quarter, because in the game you have to walk around the French Quarter and do various things. But it's like in a book, no one wants to hear that Gabriel Knight walked from one quadrant of the French Quarter to another. And so I remember when I read this book, I was just like, wow, this is unbelievably bad. Like, Jane Jensen is not a novelist, she is a game designer. And I mean, that's why Jane Jensen is not a novelist today. She did write some other novels. And then also there's Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within. But Gabriel Knight 3 was never novelized. But actually, I do want to point out that Gabriel Knight 2, she did a better job novelizing Gabriel Knight 2 than she did Gabriel Knight 1. This actually reads more like a novel and less like a video game script. So this one's more readable. Okay, so let me show you the contents of Gabriel Knight 3. I remember Gabriel Knight 3 is actually how I was introduced to Gabriel Knight. I kept seeing this game in the media store, and I was like, at the time I had a part-time job, and so I would go to the media store every week with the $50 that I made that week and buy a new game. And I kept seeing Gabriel Knight 3, and it always fascinated me, but I was like, I better buy a game I heard of instead of some random game. And so I didn't buy Gabriel Knight 3 till much later, and I didn't even buy it from the store. I mail ordered it. But I remember seeing like this box art in the store, and I was like, oh man, this looks so awesome. Like, there's so many characters in the game, and it's all 3D and cool looking. But like, I just didn't even know what Gabriel Knight was, so I didn't buy it till much later. But then I did buy it, and I played it, and I was like, this game is so awesome. Like, I love this game. I've played through it. So Gabriel Knight 1, I've only played once. Gabriel Knight 2, I've only played characters. Like, it only has a cast of this many characters. Like, it's not trying to cram in a bunch of characters, but all of these characters that you see here along the bottom of this, they're all just very, very interesting characters. And so I really enjoyed playing this game. The story's very interesting. And I thought so the interface in the game, the way you control the character is actually kind of weird, and they were just experimenting for the first time with this game. But interestingly enough, the guy that programmed the tools for this game, he went on to be like the lead programmer of Destiny at Bungie Soft, and the tool set used to make Gabriel Knight 3 is actually very robust. And if you read through like the README document that's kind of hidden on the CD-ROMs, he actually writes that you could just make your own point-and-click adventure game completely agnostic of Gabriel Knight, just with modding the game the same way people made mods for Quake and for Duke Nukem 3D. You could do that with Gabriel Knight 3. Unfortunately, no one ever did, because Gabriel Knight 3 was actually a financial failure. So I mentioned earlier that for Gabriel Knight 1, if you sold 100,000 copies, you were doing very well. And Gabriel Knight 3 did not sell over 100,000 copies. I believe it sold around 60 or 70,000 copies, and so it was just a complete, utter failure. And it's unfortunate, because there's no Gabriel Knight 4. And I just love the character, and I love the series. And I remember one time, after playing all the games, I loved it so much that I had this dream that Gabriel Knight actually became a TV series. And so I was like, oh man, I gotta watch that TV series so I can experience more Gabriel Knight. Unfortunately, that was just a dream that I had. But who knows? I mean, with all the TV series coming out on Netflix, maybe it'll be a TV series someday. But let's open up the box and take a look at the contents of Gabriel Knight 3. I don't know how ASMR sounding that CD was, but okay. So let's just start with the discs here. Oh, here's a funny thing. The game is made by Sierra, and Half-Life was published by Sierra originally. So there's this advertisement for Half-Life on the back of it. And I mean, I played Gabriel Knight 3 before I played I played it after I played Half-Life. But I mean, one of the amazing things about Gabriel Knight 3 was it was 3 CD-ROMs of amazing gameplay, and it was M-rated, which, I mean, I never had an issue with M-rated games, but it was a very, very good game. I just loved this game. And actually, going back to the M rating, one thing that amazed me, Gabriel Knight 1 and even Gabriel Knight 3 was the first game I ever played that had the F word, and I was amazed at that. Okay, so there's also a game manual for Gabriel Knight, and yeah, Jane Jensen just loves having a lot of stuff written. There's so much amazing stuff in Gabriel Knight 3. I highly recommend it for anyone that plays adventure games. Now, Gabriel Knight 3 still kind of had a context menu, but you still had to bring up like an inventory menu and stuff. Like, the character wouldn't automatically decide to use an object the way a lot of games do it now. But I do remember I actually got stuck in the very, very first act of the game. Well, not necessarily act, but the game is broken up into parts of the day. And I got stuck in the very first part, and the thing I was missing is you have to look at a bookstore window. And there was nothing to really say, you have to look at this bookstore window to conclude the act. But that's the one thing I was missing, and I remember this game, but it took more people than the first game. Yeah, I mean, I wish I was one of these people. They just got to make one of the coolest games ever, and, you know, not many people remember it, but I remember it. And then, of course, Gabriel Knight is played by Tim Curry still. Let me see if I can get that so you can actually see it. I have to hold it at such a weird angle for the lights. But the rest of the cast is just like generic video game voice actors. There's no one really famous except for the guy that plays Q in Star Trek. He appears in this. Montreux is played by John Delancey or whatever. Montreux is like the main bad guy, and he's played by the guy that plays Q in Star Trek The Next Generation. And I mean, some of these other names might be like people that have been in TV shows and stuff, but Tim Curry's certainly the most famous. Okay, now this game takes place in Rennes-le-Château, France, and that's a real place, and I've always wanted to visit it ever since I played this game. And so there's not a bibliography, I guess, but they do add this for further reading. I just have to hold it at such a weird angle. But the further reading sort of says, here's all the different interesting stuff that Jane Jensen was looking into when she designed the game. And I did read this one called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was kind of interesting, but it was also very boring. And so, I mean, a lot of this stuff is really boring, but in video game form it's very exciting to read. And actually, I like to think that the guy that wrote the Da Vinci Code ripped off Gabriel Knight, because Gabriel Knight had a lot of the same ideas, and Gabriel Knight's more interesting in my opinion than the Da Vinci Code. And I mean, the guy that wrote the Da Vinci Code was accused of ripping off Holy Blood, Holy Grail as well. But it's like, well, one of them is non-fiction speculation and the other one is a story, so I mean, ripping off is not the word I would use. I mean, they just were influenced by it and then they wrote a story around it, and I don't have an issue with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing anything like that. But that's the game manual. Now, Gabriel Knight also includes a prologue comic book, but the comic book for Gabriel Knight 1 was about the history of the Schattenjägers. This comic book is literally just a prologue to the events that happen right before the game takes place. And I don't really like additional reading materials in video games, and I think I didn't even read this when I played Gabriel Knight 3, because it's actually, it goes on for a while. But I mean, you get to see Gabriel Knight here and Grace and stuff, and they look very cool. I don't think this art style is as good as the Gabriel Knight 1 comic book, but it's still pretty cool looking. And that's the comic book for Gabriel Knight 3. And then, of course, it also has some interesting artwork on the back that looks very scary, very horrific. I wouldn't really call these games scary games, personally. And first, I have 2 copies of the comic book for whatever reason. Oh, it's because this isn't my original copy of Gabriel Knight 3. I think I kept the comic book, but nothing else from my original copy, and then I rebought it. But then there are some extras as well. There is an order form for a strategy guide, and also you could subscribe to some magazine called Computer Games if you want to. And then there's an advertisement to buy Nightmare on Elm Street. You can get a rebate if you buy Nightmare on Elm Street. I have no idea why this was included with Gabriel Knight. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe someone just happened to throw it in this box when they sold it to me. And then, software. Whoever owned this one previously did not register their software. So anyway, that is my Gabriel Knight games, and Gabriel Knight 3, of course, is one of my favorite adventure games of all time. I mean, it's one of my favorite games of all time. So, thanks for listening to me share this stuff about Gabriel Knight, and this has been Jack Everett. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk at you later.